Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Catalyst Energies. My name is Dee. Thank you for joining me. I'm so grateful that you're here. This is the daily medicine transmission. Oh, that was weird. I forgot to turn off YouTube. Anyway, that's a great way to disrupt what's going on here. So welcome back. If you're a subscriber, thank you so much for being here. If you're new to the channel, welcome. And as always, whenever you interact with content on these platforms by independent content creators, you do actually support their continued work by sharing, subscribing, liking, and commenting. It does actually make a difference in terms of this information and this content being available to a wider audience. So when you tell the AI algorithm that you like this by interacting with the content, it certainly does send a message. So welcome. Something else I want to bring up is that if you're not watching this, if you're watching this on BitChute, I have started the recording after the intro. So I'm going to see how that flies. I'm just kind of curious how that goes. I got a little bit of feedback about it, and I'm just curious if people seem to pick up on the video more if they don't have to, I don't know, scroll through a 3-minute intro that they can easily scroll through. I have no idea. So this is all about experimentation, right? Seeing what works, what doesn't work. So welcome. It's the 10th of August, 2021. Our moon is in Virgo still. And it is, there is a lot of heaviness right now. And it's kind of interesting coming off of that Lion's Gate. It was almost an immediate flip, right? With all of that really strong, creative, energetic, passionate dynamic that we were all having, I think, moving through the Lion's Gate portal. Some people more than others, of course, depending on who you are and what you're doing right now in this life. But I would say that the title of this transmission is that the beauty and the ugly are two poles together, right? There is no separating the light from the shadow in a third dimensional material universe, right? There is no separating it. And what is the shadow other than light drawing the shadow off of material density? And it's come up in my own personal experience in the last since yesterday. I'm still on my attunements. I posted a lot more of the energetic and personal experience with my attunement, but it feeds right into what's going on. And I did suspect, with the moon in Virgo, that we were going to have some time here where we really go much deeper into ourselves and our feelings, and it will very much stimulate a need for patience and resoluteness as we do this work under the surface that is not a glamorous, dramatic self-expression, even though the Sun and Mercury are still here. Keep in mind that Mercury will be moving into Virgo by the end of tomorrow. And so this energy of Virgo is just going to get more so. Now, remember that Virgo is a mutable earth sign. So there's density because it's the earth sign, but it also is malleable and shiftable. And so as we interface potentially very strongly with a lot of shadow today, within ourselves, with that is being mirrored back to us from other people, just something that we are interacting with in the larger context. It's important to realize that in the midst of this experience, as potent and as raw as it may be for some people, and this sadness and this heaviness has been looming and building. I've been feeling it. Other people are reporting it. Other people are having experiences where they are picking up on that type of feeling and emotion from other sources. And it seems to me that this is part of going into these spaces to really transmute them. And for as much as it is uncomfortable, as much as we want to bypass this feeling, as much as we want to do all of the things that the ego has at its disposal in order for us to survive as a psyche, right? And so all of the tricks to bypass looking at and acknowledging that shadow and holding space for it, I suspect will come out in all different kinds of ways in the next day or so. And it is the Virgo energy where we really learn our character, who we really are and who we want to be. And there's so much potential in Virgo to really put things where they belong, to be detail oriented, to be hygienic, energetic hygiene. I've been talking about this for years. And it's no less important right now. If anything, it is becoming every single day, it's becoming more and more important as we collectively start to come to the conclusion that our reality is a result of our manifestation power, and our emotions and our feelings, specifically the power behind them, is what makes worlds, right? And we talked about this yesterday with the reading because of how incredible our conscious awareness and projection is with our energy, that we can literally shape our physical landscape. And so we can do that through a conscious awareness of this, or we can do this from an unconscious awareness. And Neptune doesn't care either way. Neptune is going to take our vital energy and it's going to allow us to substantiate something. And Virgo, being the opposition of Pisces, is giving us a real strong opportunity. And as Mercury moves into Virgo, right, the ruler of Virgo, the sun will move into Virgo. Venus and Mars are there. We talked about the Draco. It's heavy. It's so heavy and dense. The reptilian nature and the reptilian brain, the limbic system that has that is a survival mechanism. It's so heavy, and there's so much sadness that is being accessed and brought to the surface. And we can use this as our own process of awakening, or we can kind of let it, drag us down. And I think this will become more evident on an emotional and feeling based level when the moon does come into Scorpio. We'll square the sun in our first quarter square. That will be happening over the weekend. So we still have to get through Virgo and Libra first. So there will be also opportunities to really feel into the form of balanced relationship. And oh boy, I'm curious to see how people are feeling, if they are feeling this, if they're having experiences that are drawing this up to the surface, and how they are managing it for themselves, because there's no separating these things. And in fact, it is the duality here of beauty and ugly that allows for that alchemical process, the squaring of the circle, right? The fall from grace and the 7 as a divine number that allows in divine intervention. We have to adjust ourselves, and there are lots of quincunxes today. So we'll get into the astrology in full, because there are plenty of opportunities today to really practice and to practice our ability to hold space for this shadow, and not to either attach to it, not to bypass it, not to give it more than it deserves, right? It's important to honor, because without the shadow, we need the space within us in which to create. And the Virgo energy is our ability as conscious co-creators to utilize our awareness around these things, the shadow, for instance, the darkness, what's going on under the surface, right? Getting into that introverted space to understand ourselves. This is where we make actual headway. This is where we take that mutable earth energy of Virgo and actually put it to practice, routines, habits, energetic hygiene. Hygiene's a big part of the Virgo archetype, and all to be of service, right? It's not meant to bring us anything other than the character and the ability to be of full service to whatever relationships we embark on, whatever it is that we enter into as a balanced relationship, either personally or socially, energetically, culturally. It doesn't really matter. The point is more of the Libra and the 7th house representing the form. So in Virgo time is, this is the house of hidden enemies, the 6th house. This is the house of getting our shit together. This is the house of healing crises, because it's in the convalescence and the healing, the act of healing that we learn how far our container can really stretch, right? Our boundaries get pushed and moved around in the Virgo time, but it doesn't come without a descent into some level of darkness. And our feelings are incredible navigational tools if we see them that way, and will show us the direction. The trick is not to get consumed by them, which was going to be, I suspect, a theme as this week unfolds and we get to the first quarter moon in Scorpio squaring a Leo sun. So let's go and look at the reading for today. Oh man, I hope everyone is doing well as they can, taking very good care of themselves. Alex K says, I've been super emotional the past few days. Man, I'm completely with you. Like, the depth of it has been substantial. And I know other people have been feeling it too, either channeling other types of beings or situations that are leading them to access this deep emotion, just interpersonal situations and dynamics that are bringing it right to the surface. And the trick really is to not attach to these situations as if they are the essence of you, but to utilize them, as I said, as a navigational tool, and specifically with the moon in Virgo, to have the ability to use our analysis and discrimination, and to use our analysis and discrimination, right? Discernment is a big part of Virgo, but also our intuition, right? To get into the feminine aspect of what Virgo really represents, which is a person that is truly of themselves, owned by nothing, owned by no one. There is no other aspect that's coming in and taking over our personhood, but we are also responsible for ourselves in this place. And so, yeah, I've been feeling it too. And it seems to be a crescendo, right? It's building and building and building. And I think with the moon moving through Virgo and then moving into Libra, if we really don't harness this time right now, I feel like Libra is going to be a lot of back and forth. And it'll probably be that way anyway. Until we get to that transformational, deep, dark feeling that Scorpio represents. So I want to let's get into the chart, or let's get into the reading here, and see what we got going on here. So, and I'll bring myself down to a little. So we see here that, the Ace of Cups is our causal factor here. We have the Two of Cups reversed at the center. So the axis here that I've talked about many times is, I was listening to this video by Dan Winter. I kind of dropped off listening to him for a while. And I think, I really needed to collect a lot more experience and technical knowledge in order to really, there's a couple things in my life right now that I've gone back to after like the last year of really educating myself and retapping into my scientific knowledge. And wow, there was so much, and I'll link it into social media because it just blew my mind. And if you're not familiar with Dan Winter, he's an electrical engineer and he's got all the ascension science, like he's got it backed up. And he talks a lot about things that we talk about here. And one of the things he talked about is the longitudinal versus transverse wave, which of light or oscillation. We can use light as a really good example. Is that cross point is where a stargate opens, and our heart is in fact, I just felt like that really strongly. The heart is in fact that stargate. It's a portal, and I've talked about this symbolically and archetypally, but it's energetically also the point of that stargate, and it is where, the center of that toroidal field that is surrounding us comes from the heart. So we see here that we have Two of Cups reversed, but we have the Ace of Cups as our causal factor. So it's important to realize, just because there is growing feelings, that there's pure feeling in the Ace of Cups, that just because there is this, we can't separate the two polarities. And this is what we get when we move into the Two of Cups, is that differentiation in a very material way. The Two of Cups is Venus and Cancer. So our causal factor here is, I'll bring my face back. Our causal factor here has a lot to do with this source of love, this new emotional frequency coming in, this new feeling, this pure feeling coming in. And just because it's the ace does not necessarily denote that it's going to feel good. It's just it shows us the pureness of this feeling and the newness of the feeling and the seed point of the feeling experience. And it's from this card that we get the title of this transmission, which is in fact the pure feeling, the pure feeling, of course, and then the beauty and the ugly of the situation are inseparable. They're two sides of the same coin. And the image that I used of the thumbnail, right? The image for today's transmission, it's a beautiful picture, and it's my own photography, but there's a really important undertone to that. And that picture was taken on a plantation that we toured in Charleston 2 years ago, May 2019, right after my first Reiki master attunement. That was an intense experience being there, because boy, it brought up a lot of past life stuff that I had not touched, having to do with all of the themes surrounding a plantation in the South in the United States. Beautiful property, beautiful property. And a lot of what had gone on there has, I feel like, been transmuted, and the caretakers actually of that property are descendants of slaves that had originally lived there. And I can go into that story some other time, because it's pretty remarkable what happened there, that Magnolia Plantation. But again, beautiful property, beautiful land. It's swampy, of course, but there's also an ugliness that is, part of what's going on there as well. We can't separate these things from each other. And we try to do that. And it usually... this is how we get divisive, right? This is how we end up bifurcated amongst ourselves, is because we try to separate these aspects rather than acknowledging that they are in fact two sides of the same coin. And just like this Ace of Cups, you have two directions, just like a toroidal field. Look at it. I mean, it looks just like one, right? You have the field outside of it. You have the vortex that's basically created down the center. And it's the cup, right? Our own heart. So even though this is a new emotional capacity, and it's very new, and it's pure, and it's a seed point, it doesn't mean that it's like, that it's going to feel the way we want it to feel, because we have all of these layers of our ego and our emotional brain and the limbic system and all of our experiences that are the filter for these very pure experiences. So that's something to keep in mind as we interface with the rest of this reading, because we have a lot of Cancerian energy in this reading that eventually is the capstone is very Capricornian, as we see here is the devil. So let's move through this. We have that into the heart, like I said, the Two of Cups, but it's reversed, okay? Venus in Cancer. So when the Two of Cups in and of itself is that first differentiation, the first polarization, it's the separation that allows us to unify in the first place. And so oftentimes this card is very sweet and very nurturing and very loving. It's love, my God. It's the experience of love, because there is a differentiation in a physical material way, a separation in order for us to practice and experience communion. So there is polarization here now and differentiation. And we need a counterpart or a source or a goal outside of ourselves to actually have this experience. Now, the fact that it's reversed, I mean, the first thing I thought of, because I'm feeling it very strongly, and maybe this is too much of an overlay of my own energy in this reading, but I talked to many people already, and they're all in their own ways going through some similar version of this, that this is like a very broken heart, right? This is an experience of like pain and almost dissipation in some ways, based on how we feel about this new energy coming in, this new feeling, right? That the heart of us being the center of that field. And now, of course, this could be the experience within us, and that's certainly one way to look at it. But if you look at all of the reversals down this vertical axis of our own energetic vortex, it does there's some interesting meanings that go along with each of these cards that I'm going to get into. But I would say that like the new feeling that's coming in is forcing this differentiation in a way that's really uncomfortable, and it's possibly dissipating the energy. Perhaps we're feeling a broken heart, right? The differentiation isn't a positive thing in our own mind. It's much more of a painful process and a painful feeling. Now, when we look at where our energetic root is right now, the 4, or birth, is a pretty self-explanatory energy when it's upright. You see the children running to the mother. She's got this basket of flowers. You see like these, it's like kind of these monuments, more like a stone circle kind of in the background. And the little doggy right here, representing, of course, that, the canine, very Cancerian, of course. And birth, right? This is a newness coming in, right? And that is what birth represents. And so in its reversal, boy, not only in this heart space, right, our own personal Stargate portal that is built into our entire who we are as humans, not only are we feeling this dissipation, this bifurcation, and the pain of it, right? Even with the fact that it's a new feeling, it's just like, ugh, this is painful. Where we're also struggling is at the root here, is subconsciously, energetically at the root. This is where we're drawing our power from. And there is a real challenge here with whatever we're birthing, and the pregnancy or romance, whatever it is. I mean, these are very sweet feelings here, and very loving and nurturing and Cancerian, right? Because it's the mother and it's the womb and it's the bringing forward of new life. So when it's reversed, there's feelings of lovelessness, unfulfilled desire for a family may be present, difficulty in finding purpose, right? Because the birth can also represent the birth of your trajectory, your purpose, your mission, project. There could be a delay with these new beginnings, and it's important that we, if we're finding that we're hitting a wall in some ways, it's, there is our quincunx, right? If we're hitting a wall, if we're square peg in a round hole, or vice versa, this is the alchemy that we are able to practice in order to find a new way, a different way to go about this new start, or just acknowledging on some level that there is a challenge here to bringing forward this new birth and difficulty in this process. It can be a difficult birth, or we're having a really hard time, like really connecting, or we are feeling lovelessness or unfulfilled desire for this type of energy, which is really difficult when you're talking about where you are rooted energetically and where you draw your power from, is this difficulty. And as it's moving up, as part of this vortex, as we are drawing power from this place, moving up through the heart, right, and creating a field around us, we do see some potential light at the end of the tunnel here, almost literally, because the 2 of keys, right? So we have the 2 of cups, and now at the top here we have the 2 of keys. We know 4 is also, the 2 plus 2, 2 times 2 is a doubled 2, and we have these doubled 2s kind of stacked head to head with, or stacked in this weird way with each other. So we're feeling something new, and it's the differentiation is much more obvious, and the pain of it is more obvious to us than the unification potential. And we're really struggling with that in order to bring this new thing forward, because we're kind of fixated or feeling very deeply the differentiation part of it and the polarization of it. But what there is something to focus on here that is really important is that the treasure, right? You see the treasure. It's this little treasure chest. This person's whole life has been upturned. You see a crescent moon here. You see the lantern overhead that's shining very brightly. But this person, look again, is focused on what's going wrong, focused on the lack, focused on the fact that this is all upended and in shock. He's covering his mouth. He's just like, what in the hell has happened here? So, but in its reversal, this is actually this is a gift, right? And to realize that the lid has fallen open. When you turn this over, the lid's fallen open, the treasure is revealed, and the events have us feeling vulnerable, very vulnerable, right? These feelings that we're just like, you know what, I want to shove those away, or I don't want to feel them anymore, so I'm going to use my mind to just like, construct this mental framework in order to explain this away, or I'm just not even going to acknowledge it, and I'm going to engage with my all of my escapist tendencies, and those go all kinds of ways, right? Addiction and apathy and projection and transfer, all of them. And I talked about this, I wrote about this just now with the Reiki attunements, because part of the master attunements, for as much as it is this beautiful expansion, you also get the other side of it just as much, and you have to be able to hold space for that. That's the mark of mastery, is to hold space for that which is the darkness and the shadow, even when we find ourselves vulnerable and really, really uncomfortable with the process. This is showing us that even though we are feeling vulnerable, even though we're just like, something came in and just totally upended my life, or my sense of self and safety, or whatever it is, something has been revealed. And it's the treasure within us, the light within us, right? Our spirit has been unveiled in the process. And this is something that we can really put our conscious attention to, even though we're struggling with is like a difficult birth, right? Because it's so uncomfortable, and the separation that happens during a birthing process is very real, right? It is this connection between the child and the mother that is separated. And it's still a beautiful moment of creation, right? Coming to fruition. But that moment of it happening, you still have to experience the pain of the separation. So we have here at the top of our awareness, this gift of the situation that has left us feeling vulnerable and kind of raw emotionally, actually unveiling to us like the real true power and essence of who we are. And I think that this is a really important thing to wrap ourselves around right now, because where this is headed is a really strong smack in the face of reality, right? The devil. And everybody has their way of reading the devil. And it is Saturn. And where is Saturn? Saturn's retrograde in Aquarius. Saturn is going to be in a quincunx with the moon today in Virgo, right? There is that opportunity to adjust, the opportunity for alchemy, squaring the circle. And it's retrograde too. So this is a real important that we are, even though we're hitting this wall of reality, maybe within ourselves, and having to acknowledge it in the way that it's unfolding in our outer manifestation. This also is, I actually received a reading yesterday, which is something I haven't had in a really long time. And it's important that if you are a giver or a healer or a reader or any role that you're constantly outputting, that you definitely make time and space to receive. And in the process of this, we talked about how all of these asteroids and goddesses are stacked up in Capricorn in my 12th house. They're in trine to Saturn, which is also in an earth sign. So there is actually quite a bit of cardinal energy in my chart, but you only see it if you do the expanded reading with all of the asteroids in Capricorn. And one of the things that was, the great thing about being a reader and getting a reading is that you always get these alternatives to your own ability, your own perception of these archetypes and symbols. And one of the things that was brought to my attention about Capricorn that I really appreciated and enjoyed is this concept of mastery here. If you look at this, I mean, you see that the goat has a third eye that's open, right? And it has this smile on its face. And it's very much showing the outcome of sexual alchemy, of creationary alchemy, right? Because it is very phallic. I mean, it's literally, I mean, it doesn't take much to see the symbolism here, and then the yoni here at the top, right? That is the space in which the creation happens and the unfoldment. But it's still Saturn, and there's still a boundary here, and there's still a reality that we can either master and master time and space without being trapped by it, or we just get hit in the face with Saturn. Either way, we're getting hit in the face with Saturn. We're going to bump up against this cold, hard reality here of materialism that is represented by the devil in this card. And the devil is really this representation. And like I said, everybody's got their own interpretation. I'm giving you mine, which is that, yes, it's mastery because you realize that this is not the end. This is not the pinnacle, right? This is not the end of the chart. There's still Aquarius and Pisces to go. Although this is very important because it is a representation of mastering this material realm. And that includes time. And so when you're able to acknowledge this and hold space for this too, then you are really stepping into true mastery. But it's not Saturn is not easy, right? I mean, there is incredible benefit to Saturn: structure, form, discipline, right? Authority, and the boundary of cause and effect is very much played out with the Capricornian aspect. But it's not easy. There's a lot of potential here, but we have to allow ourselves on a soul level to not be trapped, and not everybody is going to be able to move past this. And part of that feels very connected to this sadness, but it also does provide an opportunity to practice our alchemy with the shadow as a master. But it's going to come through like I said, Saturn is going to be in a quincunx today with a Virgo moon, and we'll talk about that because there's a connection here with how we feel in terms of being able to look out past the duality versus the cold, hard reality of duality in a material realm that we have to learn to master, not just give ourselves over to. And that's, I feel like, is an important thing. Now, remember, we talked about yesterday, before I move on to the guidance, we saw yesterday in yesterday's reading, we saw at the top of the chart, right, the waterfall, the Six of Forces, the ability to shape our literal landscape, and that the guidance points were those Two of Roses, the little dramatic confrontation that's going to actually show you something more substantial. Well, here it is. It's right here. The Ace of Cups is that new feeling experience based on that interaction, and then having to move into the present moment of our energetic vortex, which is really it's feeling very vulnerable and really contending with the feeling of separation and the feeling of dissipation and broken heart, and the polarization is more obvious to us than the unification, which is why there seems to be a lot of struggle here with this birthing process, right? But ultimately, there is a lot of opportunity for mastering this realm if we accept this opportunity and honor the shadow that's coming through, and seeing it for what it actually is. So, in terms of the guidance, being offered here right now, just remember that the Akashic field is everything and anything. Any experience that we want to bring into this physical form is going to be manifested as a result of our connection to our feelings, right? And the power behind them to shape the reality. Remember that. And so we have access to all of this life force energy in the universe, and it's directly connecting to us in our own personal field, right? And it's through that we attract what it is that we are vibrating at, right? And we can engage in the pursuit of information with a conscious focus if we want to go into our own Akash. But this is going to require some solitude. And I don't think that's necessarily going to be a hard thing when we're dealing with this Two of Cups over here. Now, there's a difference between isolation and solitude. Isolation is what happens when you are not a master of your physical reality and you can't go into solitude. Remember, Virgo is the work of the hermit. And then the experience of the hermit, comes around to the 12th house in some ways. But solitude is a conscious choice, and it's a loving choice to be alone in order to really know the difference between you and other, in order to really get quiet enough to hear the subtle intuitive guidance that usually gets drowned out by our very outwardly focused, doing focused society, masculine, right? And there's a silence that you get in your solitude, like I said, that allows you to not only tap into your own Akash, tap into the Akashic field, but it's really going to, I think, I do sense here that this is going to really help in this difficult birth process that is really the undertone of a lot of what we're experiencing right now. It is a difficult birth. And when we get to the chart, I'm going to show you the Schumann because it's been pretty calm. And then right this morning, it just shot up to 70 hertz after being at baseline of 7, maybe 10 hertz, and it shot up to 70 and is probably still blasting right now. And so when the heartbeat of the planet accelerates, then we get a larger, higher oscillating magnetic field. And what happens... that's very similar. Somebody had made a point about this, that the birthing process of the planet, we're going along with her, we're tapping into her, and it's not an easy process. It never is. So there is an acceleration of the birth or the heart rate of the planet when the Schumann spikes because there's birthing of something new coming in. And so when we connect into the Schumann resonance, whatever it is, especially when it's really blasting like this, some people have the symptoms of ringing ears and sleep disruptions and headaches and all kinds of the irritability, the anxiety, just the higher energy, just like what's happening. That's very much part of what could be going on as well. And it's like the bliss mode as well, with that higher oscillating magnetic field is, connected to a higher oscillating field within our own body as well, which tends to correspond to these upper chakras, which is where a lot of bliss is. But there can be bliss. I know this is a hard one. There can be bliss in these moments of darkness, in the moments of the shadow. You have to be able to find it there too, in order to really master your reality, that you find yourself in. It's important that we acknowledge this. And so solitude right now, giving yourself some time in order to really just be alone and in silence in whatever way you can, especially if this is coming out and manifesting in your personal life somehow. Give yourself some space away from that relationship or those relationships or those people, or just that, feeding that feeling too. You want to give yourself some space from that as well. And that's where you can really tap into the Akashic records of yourself, your own Akash, and assist in what is definitely a difficult birth process. I think it's a difficult birth process. And it's all difficult, right? That's kind of the whole point, is that they're, again, beauty and ugly. They're two sides of the same coin, right? The pain and the joy in the moment of birth is also part of the same bliss experience. It's just different aspects of it that have to be acknowledged, especially in this dimension of reality. It's different outside of this. And when you access your multidimensional self, you can certainly... that really gives you a lot more to work with. But if you don't even know what I'm talking about, this one thing at a time here, you got to master this reality first, this dimension first, if you want to actually have any success of getting 5D and above. So when it comes to the treasure within, so here's the camel. This was a big part of the astrology yesterday, right? big part of it, this idea that you have all the resources embedded within you to get through the challenges. And what are the challenges? Well, when the sun is just shining and shining and shining, and there's no water necessarily, or the water that there is there gets dried up, you have a desert. The camel is completely built anatomically for this situation. And I just talked about this yesterday, about all of the ways that the camel is built. And so now we see it here. So if you're struggling, right, move slowly, deliberately, know that your inner resources are going to sustain you. So even though you're vulnerable because stuff has been upended, you had to see some things you don't want to see, realize that you have everything within you, right? The treasure has been dumped out of the box, and your soul has been revealed, your spirit has been revealed, and those are your inner resources. And so you may have to go slower, right? You may have to take a break if there's a sandstorm, although camels have all of the ability to keep traveling through a dust storm or a sandstorm. If you've ever been in one, it's impossible to see anything. Unless, and even if you have goggles and, your head's wrapped and everything, you usually have to like sit down and take a minute. And so if you have to do that, that's okay too, because the thing is, there's way more time than you think. The Six of Scrolls, the sands of time, when it's upright like this, it certainly gives the indication that it's time to roll up your sleeves and get to work. Right? The sun is setting. The sand is about to empty from the top of the hourglass. This guy literally is rolling his sleeves up. He's got his plan in his hand. He's gone over all of them. And now it's time. And he's even taken notes, right? And it's on this pedestal. It's in the center of the room. You got these 3 candles going. So there is a trifecta of light here for when the sun finally goes down. There's still going to be illumination. But when it's reversed, it's letting us know that there's more time than we think, right? If you turn the card over, the hourglass is full. And so the task at hand may require more time and research in order to really master time and reality. And these two things are connected. Because it's about, Capricorn is the unfolding and the momentum of the physical matrix, right? The fractal of nature in its unfoldment is Capricorn. And that's based on a collective of individuals who are operating under a collective belief system, can build worlds, can build worlds, it can build institutions, cultures, societies, religions, right? The law, right? Capricorn is the letter of the law, but it's time and space itself. And these two things are connected because this is about mastering time. It's not controlling you. You are, in fact, able to travel back in time. You are able to master time, dilate it, constrict it as you need it. And again, take your time. You have everything that you need. We're moving through an arid period, perhaps, that doesn't seem to be much. Our resources are within us and they're substantial. And take it one step at a time and realize that there may be more work to be done here in order to find this mastery. And it's going to come through some solitude. It's going to come through some silence and an ability to feel into the Akashic field, to know what it is that we've come here to do, what we are here to learn from these situations, and it'll really assist us in this difficult. It's not going to make it any less difficult, but it's going to allow us not to identify with the difficulty, but to stay in our own power and access our inner resources to move through a very difficult process. So just being able to talk about it like this is really assisting me in my own experience of it, because it's very heavy and very raw in that heart space. And so there's a lot of work that can be done in this space if we accept it, right? If we accept it for what it is. So here's our chart for today. It's the 10th. I know that the 11th is kind of projected to things to happen. I guess we'll see, right? Because Mercury moves into Virgo at that moment, and Venus will be in a trine to Pluto tomorrow as well. Pluto is now moved, just a matter of time, is going to move into its next degree of in its retrograded Capricorn, right? And our reliance upon beautiful traditions, our reliance upon everything our culture has built up in order for us to understand the divine and to understand ourselves is here's that smack in the face of reality, right? Is that Pluto is going to be tearing down all of the aspects that are able to be torn down, which is all of material reality. It is all subject to decay. Nothing gets away from that in a material way. And you know what happened to the one character who was able to reanimate and bring, people back from the dead, besides Jesus, right? And that was a different story entirely, the Lazarus story. But Ophiuchus, right? The snake charmer, the head of, or Asclepius, right? He was using his incredible knowledge to bring people back from the dead. And they were like, oh, can't have that. That upsets the whole balance of everything. And so again, it's all subject to decay, all of it. All aspects of material reality, even the very protons on an atomic level in this entire universe will one day decay. Okay. And so understanding that as well is really going to help how we move through the next day, especially because the moon will have moved into Libra tomorrow. And then there'll be those two big transits of Mercury moving into Virgo, and then Venus in that trine to that Earth trine to Pluto. So we'll talk more about that tomorrow. Let's focus on what's going on today, because in the meantime, Mercury in Leo is going to have its opposition with Jupiter. So Jupiter is so direct, so intimately connected to Mercury because he's his father, right? He is his father. And so there is tension there too, but there's also tension with the empirical, logical, conceptualizing mind of Mercury, and the higher mind and the understanding and the synthesis that Jupiter represents. And so, and one is in the sign of the collective as a whole, which is Jupiter in Aquarius, and the other is in the sign of the individual expressing their true sovereign nature as an individual, with Mercury, which is about the individual mind, our actual nervous system, like the functioning of our nervous system, the knowledge and empirical knowledge and rational thought and the swiftness, right? Whereas Jupiter just expands and expands and expands. Mercury is riding the wave of light. And so this is going to be part of, I can already feel this tension, which won't, it'll be more exact later in the day, but I can already feel this tension, between this yearning to bring this unconscious desire up to the surface versus the metamorphosis as a collective that Jupiter is ultimately representing and advocating for in some ways. So, and remember, Jupiter is retrograde, so we're feeling a lot of this within us. It's really obvious. It's giving us pause. We're paying attention to it more because it's retrograde. And it's an experience within us as well. So let's take a moment in the Wayback Machine here. That is really the benefit, the real strength and benefit of astrology, is that it is a fourth dimensional modality. It allows you to move through time and space without leaving the third dimension, which I think is how understanding the language of astrology in general is like a primer for being able to navigate fourth dimension in general. So just understanding the language. Do you remember? I've been looking for this metaphor. Okay. Do you remember the movie Arrival, right? If seen the movie Arrival, and if you haven't, you're just going to have to go watch the trailer so that you know what I'm talking about. But in the process, I mean, if you've seen the movie, you know exactly where I'm going. In the process of the main character learning the language of the beings that came, it was a primer. It primed her mind and her consciousness to think in a cyclical way with time, right? It primed her to be able to think about time outside of a linear experience, which is what we do in this dimension. And that allowed her to see the whole picture and all the other things that go along with it. It's the same thing with astrology. It's a language. And when you learn the language, it is a primer for functioning, energetically and consciously, be able to actually understand and function within the fourth dimension, which is through time, right? That just came to me. And so I wanted to share that because it's such an important aspect, why astrology is so important, in terms of like I said, like a primer, like this midpoint, this way that calibrates your mind and your consciousness to get out of the linear perspective of time and look at as much larger cycles. And when you do that, then your ability to interface in this way is increased and enhanced significantly. Okay, so now that we've gone in the Wayback Machine and we're addressing things from a cyclical standpoint, let's start talking about it. So the moon earlier today was in a T-square with her own nodal axis. So she is in Virgo, and here are the nodes. I really wish this would put the south node on here, because the function of this is to allow it to move forward per hour, per day, per month. And I really like that in terms of teaching tool and like showing people. But you have to just use your imagination here that the south node, or K2, is right here. It's making an opposition and then would cause a square also with K2. So the moon is in a T-square. And so what is that T-square? Well, this is the point of release of the tension. The square to each of these positions takes the tension off of their opposition and balances it out in this square. And of course, a square is friction. It forces change and growth, right? Cross purposes. So the moon in Virgo at this point is the tension between where we are drawn to on a soul level, which is to really utilize our mental capacity and our a lot of those mercurial aspects of empirical knowledge and swiftness of mind to really penetrate to the center of our obstacle, to not get off focus, to not and to really get to the heart of things, the bullseye, right? And so it can be piercing through our obstacles in a mundane way by using our mind and our focus. It also can be thought of in a Zen way, where the bullseye is our own ego consciousness, and we can utilize those arrows of our own mind in order to penetrate through that and get to something deeper. However you want to conceptualize it, this is where we're being drawn, the head of the dragon. And of course, K2 being the tail of the dragon, what we're leaving behind, but we've mastered. So it provides momentum moving forward, which is at Antares, and this is at Aldebaran. And as I talked about before, we are now getting into the territory of the Hyades star cluster, which means the Hyades star seeds are really starting to come into focus. And talk about the density and the vulnerability and the rawness of these feelings moving through us. Wow. In ancient astrology, right, the Hyades star cluster often was associated with storm surges, flooding, massive rains, right? It's the overflow of emotion that the Hyades represent. They are the stepsisters of the Pleiades. They are also daughters of Atlas, just like the Pleiades. And they are sorrowful, right? They not only discover and experience and are curious about their environment and what's around them. They also feel very deeply and are not afraid to express what they feel, regardless if it's joy or sorrow. And, it really, if you have the Hyades in your chart and you were getting an ancient astrological reading, for instance, like fixed star astrology, perhaps Vedic astrology. I'm not sure exactly. I would have to do more research about the Hyades star cluster, and specifically Vedic astrology in their mythological context. But what I do know is that oftentimes, if this was in your natal chart, it really pointed to the possibility of a storm surge or flooding or rains that were just, so much, that would cause flooding, right? The surge of emotion. And so there is a lot of that here, especially with these in conjunction with fixed royal stars of Aldebaran at the north and Antares, along with asteroid Juno in Sagittarius at K2. So this tension is significant and has been playing itself out now for a number of weeks. And as the nodes progress in their natural retrograde motion in reference to us, it's going to get more and more into the Hyades experience, and the Hyades star seeds are really the way showers for how to manage this. And this comes along with so much of what we just talked about with the reading, in terms of being able to, you don't want to suppress it. You don't want to bypass it. You don't want to escape it. You just want to let it flow through you, because it's a marker and it's an indicator, and it's powerful. But we want it to be going towards Aldebaran, Archangel Michael. But we can use the momentum of Antares, the heart of the scorpion, and Uriel, Archangel Uriel, the fire of God. We can use that momentum to move us forward. So now that I've given all of this context, the moon in this T-square with Virgo, the way that we can really harness the tension of this opposition is to express the uniqueness of who we are, regardless of any social or cultural standard that's placed upon us. Remember, we talked about yesterday, especially because this is where Mars still is. So the moon's just coming off of its conjunction with Mars. We talked about it being a huge Draco activation yesterday. And I can't even tell you how many seemingly random coincidences about Draco information just popped up in my life yesterday after doing this transmission. So we know that there is something very significant about the Draco reptilian resonance that is making itself known in our awareness right now, that needs to be seen. It needs to be seen, and it needs to be acknowledged, and it needs to be honored for what it is, because it's all part of source creator, no matter what end of the polarity it's on. And it's okay to have this incredible surge of emotion about things. It's a barometer in a lot of ways, and it certainly is a navigational tool. So being ourselves, being uniquely ourselves, expressing ourselves, even though that in some ways this is going to cause friction with her own nodal axis, it really is going to provide the release point in this very natural opposition of where we're going and where we're coming from, right? The head of the dragon and the tail of the dragon. And with Draco so much involved, which is really the constellation that inspires the characterization of the moon's nodal axis, this is all wrapped up, isn't it? And the thing about the nodes, for as much as they are the trajectory of our soul's evolution, we can get kind of obsessed in that direction we're headed if we're not careful, because it is a dragon. And the serpent medicine and the reptilian energy, for as powerful as it is, if it is not directed for the highest purpose, we've talked about this many times, it does resonate in a much more dense oscillation, right, where it's self-preservation and that reptilian brain kicks in. But anyway, so the moon, right, this is how we feel, this is our intuition, this is who we are on the inside. If we can allow ourselves to feel into this unique expression of who we are, right? It doesn't have to take a form. It doesn't have to be, perfect, because there's a perfectionism that goes along with Virgo if we're not careful. It's just putting the paint on the canvas, right? Expressionism is so uniquely itself in terms of a type of the style of art. And this is where I think we can really ease this tension that is really keeping us kind of like, oh, we got to get there. You know what I mean? Just kind of let it go and let yourself just throw it out. And that's what was suggested to me yesterday. Like, find your unique expression in some way and just let it be what it is. And so in the case of emotions, since we are talking about the moon here, in the case of emotions, just let it go. Just let it flow. Not let it go like don't feel it. Just let it move through you, right? Don't get stuck on it. Don't try to squash it. Just let the feeling be the feeling and let it be a navigational tool. And for the sake of your own sanity, put it out on the canvas in some way. Write in your journal. Get some color on a canvas. You know what I mean? Like make some music. Write a song. Any type of artistic expression can come out in this way, and it'll really ease this karmic tension that we are feeling like on a regular basis. And it really has to do with our ability to let our feelings really just be what they are, and not get so caught up in the perfectionism of it, or if it's, we need to let this out so we can, still be energetically hygienic, which is a big part of the Virgo archetype. So we know that the Draco aspect is really very much wrapped up in all of this as well. So the nodes, and then this is this is where we get the quincunx with Saturn retrograde. You can see it right here. So Saturn is in this position. We've talked about it many times about the reality of people as people versus screens that we project our shit onto, and we all do it. So instead of like trying to say that you don't do it, or pretending that you don't, or pretending other people aren't, it's really, if you want to master this domain of time and space, right, not get pulled into the work of the devil, but acknowledge what it represents, we have to stop using each other as our screens for our own projections, right? And Saturn in its retrograde is making this kind of like, this is what you have to do. Like, there's no getting around this. If you try to, there's going to be a wall somewhere. So you might as well allow this fortress or the solitude that might come along with it to be the containment system for you to really work on this. Now, what happens here with this quincunx, again, this is our alchemical opportunity here to make things fit together that don't normally fit together. With the moon in Virgo, again, we find ourselves here. Again, that's what I was saying earlier. On one hand, how we feel is like, being in the world but not of it, right? Looking out beyond the shadow, the two heads looking out and beyond the shadow, like being polarity at the same time and looking out past it, not having to face it. Here it is, the quincunx. How are we going to take this feeling, right? This internalized experience of looking out past the shadow, the self, the growth of true understanding that comes out of our transcendence of duality while we're still in the world of duality is just butting heads with, and not even butting heads, but just like not fitting whatsoever with where Saturn is, which is just like, you have to deal with reality. That the duality here does in some way, the duality in some ways sets us up to do exactly what this degree of Aquarius suggests, which is rather than alchemizing and integrating, we are keeping the duality and projecting instead of alchemizing, right? And so this quincunx is another opportunity right here to take this feeling of transcendence out of duality while still being immersed in duality. It's just going to be really uncomfortable, but at the same time, again, this is our opportunity for alchemy, the squaring of the circle, the quincunx, the perfection of the seven that comes from the inability to, you reconcile the opposites with the sextile, and then you hit the quincunx, and this is where you, lead into gold, right? The philosopher's stone. That's what the alchemy really represents. So here's one opportunity. This already happened. I mean, you're looking at 3 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So this is all stuff that's been happening in our sleep state, in our dreams. I can attest to this for sure. And then from there, the moon comes into its quincunx again with Chiron retrograde. So it's had some time to just transit along here. And now, as of this morning, you have this quincunx that is exact. And it's the same basic idea, except that now we're starting to get a sense of really powerful, charismatic, and really powerful and charismatic character within us that is able to kind of like come out, and this need for order is going to be brought in. It's going to be like condensed into like one singular point of a person, right? So it's powerful, and it's somebody that can just, like I said, come in, step in, pull it all together into who they are, and it really helps satisfy this need for collective order. And that could be just within us. And with the moon, it very much is within us. And again, quincunx to Chiron retrograde in Aries, that is constantly poking at this wound of self-worth and the validity of our subjective experience, when what we know as our potential growth isn't presented to us right away. It's just like, it's so frustrating. It's like a teenager, right? I mean, we all remember being an adolescent, I think. And if not, like if you have them in your life, I had the really, the honor, honestly, of working with a lot of different children, age groups, and working with teenagers. And it's kind of funny. It's kind of funny just to be around, like my siblings have, their children are starting to embark on adolescence, and how I've had years and years of working with all kinds of young people in all age groups. And it's a very, it's a consistent dynamic with that time in your life where and you feel all of the potential of who you could be, and you just want it to happen right then, and it doesn't, and you get pissed and you get frustrated. And that's where Chiron is. And so it's actually activating wounds of self-worth and subjective experience as being invalid, right? It keeps poking at that. So again, the moon in this quincunx is opportunity here to really find the alchemy in a situation that seems like it won't fit together, which is a internalized experience, a feeling-based experience of taking the need for order into a central point of our personhood, to, like I said, to overcome some measure of like political hysteria. So again, you can see how these things don't fit together at all, very naturally or fluidly. So again, this requires us to make adjustments in order to get something even more out of this situation than each of these aspects together or separately on their own, right? So the benefit of all of this work today is that the moon is then going to make an Earth trine to our friend Uranus. And this is when, number one, this is a starseed activation, because this degree of Virgo is in sextile to Sirius. And there's a strong connection here to Virgo with a lot of things, but I do feel strong connection with Virgo and Sirius in general. That's just my read. So this connection here in a trine to Uranus in Taurus is, receiving something to let us know of a job well done, right? And in Virgo, you come to the realization here that your work on yourself and the blossoming of who you are, which happens in Leo, and then the work that you do on yourself is not separate from the lineage and the heritage and the culture that you're part of. And so when you come and not only flower, but bear fruit as an individual in an esoteric and metaphysical way, in a spiritual way, you also are this is just part of a much larger lineage that you're part of. And so the personal experience in this trine, this Earth trine today, is our emotions and our feeling of a job well done, of some manner of giving us some indication that we are on the right track and that we have done a lot of work on our character and letting us know that we're on the right track, right? So there's some measure within us that we're going to feel, that we will internally interact with on some level, how we adapt to our environment, who we are on the inside, right? The moon. Having a really beautiful relationship with Uranus, very structurally sound. Now, Uranus is going to be very out there. It's going to be outside the box. Uranus is going to trigger transformation because it's like a flash, a flash of light. And where Uranus has been really challenging us to find that collective awakening through adversity, through braving a storm, right? We talked about the storm. It's going to surge now, especially with the Hyades involved. It's going to surge. The emotions are going to surge. And this moment here with the moon is just like this trailer, right? It's a preview of how things are going to be expressed outward when the sun comes into Virgo and we have all of this other Virgo energy. So this trine to Uranus, even though it's electric, our emotions are going to be stimulated really strongly, but at the same time, it's like the out there, out of the box, transformative energy of Uranus is going to, in a lot of ways, as the third eye continues to open, right, as we continue to collectively embark on this awakening process, which is different for everyone, but on a collective level is coming, Uranus is going to go retrograde very soon. So it's important that we're taking full advantage of what it's offering to us right now. And this connection to the moon, I think, is going to just be really stable. It'll stabilize emotionally what often is very erratic and very hard to pin down. And so I think that by the end of today with this, I don't even know, where is this? This is noon. This isn't even that far away. We'll feel this connection here, this trine, this support network, this traction that they're getting with each other, right? To give us some clue on an intuitive level that we're on the right track. And really supporting us as we brave the storm surge that is consistently moving everything around on a very material level with the fixed earth of Taurus. And finally, we wrap up the day with Mercury in its full opposition to, like its direct opposition to Jupiter, right? And so let's see here. Yeah, by tonight, this is going to be the capstone, really, of today's astrology, is this opposition. And like I said, this is this yearning to an intense feeling or intuition, there you go, rising from the unconscious, is about to take form as a conscious thought. Especially with Mercury, it really wants to take form as a conscious thought form. And the opposition to Jupiter is just like, we're still in the chrysalis right now. We're still, and it's expanding that space within us, but we haven't quite emerged. Like, we're going in, the chrysalis is already developing, we're in it, we're going through the metamorphosis, and the Jupiter retrograde is, in fact, that process happening within us, and we're still in there. So Mercury is like, I want to bring this feeling from an unconscious, thing into an actual conscious thought as my mind and my conceptualization of reality, right? The thought forms that Mercury is able to work with move into the sign of discrimination and discernment, right? And so keep that in mind, that just because it's coming to the surface doesn't mean it's going to be exactly in the form that you will eventually come to discern with Mercury in Virgo, and especially with Jupiter retrograde in this position. Now, something to keep in mind, this is the degree of the next full moon. I mean, and this is we talked about this yesterday. When I say we, me and the person I was getting a reading from talked about this, because this next full moon is going to, we're looking at a cycle where our first full moon, the full moon previous, was in 0 degrees, and now it's going to be at 30 degrees or 29 degrees, 30 degrees, with this next full moon in this degree, this opposition of Jupiter and Mercury. So, and this was the case when Mars was in this position, and then when the sun comes into this position, It'll be also, the moon will be in a conjunction with Jupiter when there's a full moon. So there's a big, there is something substantial that is a cycle that is going to be completed with this next full moon. And so keep that in mind as you feel the tension here, because we haven't come out of this chrysalis yet. But at the same time, there are things coming up to the surface that our mind really wants to bring into a conscious thought form so that we can utilize it. But it's going to go through, Mercury's going to go through Virgo and do a lot of number crunching at that point. And so just keep that in mind too, right? That even though it's coming up, doesn't mean we have to act on it necessarily. And in fact, when Mercury goes into Virgo, the acting on it is really going to be the analysis of it rather than acting on it, and utilizing the good luck and fortune of Jupiter in a retrograde that is keeping us in our chrysalis, because it's not time to come out yet. As a collective, right? Aquarius as the collective. So, wow, that was quite a bit. I hope that I want to show you, let's look at the Schumann real quick here. You can see it. I'm going to refresh the page here for a second. Yeah, you can see it's just went right up to, you can see it right here, went right up to 70. Okay, you can do it. You can do it. Here we go. Yep. 71, power 71, that big, beautiful white, space here. So things are happening. They're happening on a earth-based level. And they're very strong right now. So the heartbeat of the planet is speeding up. It's accelerating. It's creating a much higher oscillating field. And so when that happens, the best thing we can do is plug into this, because we'll get all the information that we need moving forward from the planet herself. She communicates to us. She's in this birthing process. And this signifies that there's a pretty substantial raise in planetary heart rate. So I'm curious to see what's coming, and I think where we are at right now is giving us a lot of opportunity to get ourselves not organized, but yes, because that's a big part of the Virgo energy, but to really understand our emotions, to or at least discern what is ours, what is other people's, what this emotion feels like, rather than getting caught up in it, and using that as a way to shift our reality and shift our reality within us. So lots going on here. So I'm going to leave it at that for today. Thank you so much for being here. I truly appreciate each and every one of you. Really, really mean that. If you're interested in a reading or energetic support through Reiki, you can book through catalystenergies.net. That is in the description box below, the link to the website, and also Facebook and Telegram. You can connect there as well. That's where I'm posting my daily attunements and the what I share about them. I write up a piece every day. So that's on social media, so you can follow Catalyst Energies there. And I hope everybody is doing well. Please take very good care of yourselves. Let those emotions move through you, right? Let them move through you. There's a lot of information there. There is a lot of power there. And when we can harness the intensity of these emotions for our greatest good, there's nothing that can stop us. There really isn't. And then we bring forward that which is an expression of our highest self and our bliss. So, but we do have to learn to be in our bliss in the face of the shadow while we're still in a material reality, because that's inescapable. So I love you guys. Thank you for being here. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.